Welcome to Behind the Sims. At SaberSim, we're a team of professional gamblers, data scientists, and sports nerds building the best DFS optimizer and sports betting model on the market. This podcast is a behind-the-scenes look at how we do it. Every episode is an unedited recording of our team's actual conversations as we research, analyze, and iterate our way to answering the tough questions in DFS and sports betting. Whether we're answering questions like what's the best way to build your bankroll, analyzing different ways to diversify, or even building new models, we're going to share it all right here, and we aren't holding anything back. If you're ready to go deep into what it really takes to win, then this is a podcast for you. All right, so just catching Jordan up on this, actually, Eric. You and I did a quick call. Well, it was meant to be a quick call. We kind of went into things, honestly thought about recording it. But regardless, as you've been, I think the last time the three of us spoke was probably about a week ago. And you have been doing a good amount of analysis into looking at the variance of different contests, as well as just seeing the ROI different, like how much harder is one contest versus another. And there's a lot of ways we could have gone with it. You start digging in, and then as you're getting closer, I was like, all right, we should probably just touch base. So I guess, do you want to just summarize for Jordan how we kind of redirected things a little bit when you and I last spoke?
Yeah, so just I guess before, like sort of on our last call, we were talking about the ROI change in putting a lineup in one contest into the other. And so sort of where we've gone from there is, we want to match up like the actual contest selection process. And so it's like, okay, I have $5 to put in tonight. Where should I put that? And so it's pretty easy to tell people, like, obviously you want to go in the lower dollar contest first. But a piece that I felt like we were missing is we have the expected ROI difference, but if we don't know the timeline to realize that ROI, or the different contest structure that the contest is, like, that's sort of a piece that we would be missing there if we were just saying, oh, the daily dollar is softer than the base hit, like play the daily dollar. Like, those two comparisons aren't really apt because the base hit is 12 times the entry fee. And so, yeah,
it's also, I think, just going a little farther, it's also not as though it's usually that's the only decision someone's going to be making. Like, they're going to be playing many contests. So you have to kind of have more of a ranking to things.
Yeah. It's not just one contest versus another. It's the whole, I don't know, breadth of the contest. So that's kind of, I guess, where we left off. And then what Andy and I sort of chatted about was trying to sort of nail down, I guess, how to show the different variants in the contests, the different sort of paths that you could see in a season, stuff like adding like a bankroll in. So, if you're playing 2% of your bankroll in this contest over a season, like, what does that kind of look like in terms of, how often you're making money, how often you're losing your bankroll, like just sort of stuff like that to kind of, I guess, like give people an idea of, okay, if you're choosing one contest over the other, like, how does that actually look in your season of results?
Yeah, and one of the big things that we were digging into is, like, how do we measure that? And so because we have basically 3,000 sims for every game, we can just sim out 3,000 different ways that these contests are going to go for a single lineup. And that's not perfect by any means, but we debated doing that versus, okay, like, what do you do for the next day? Like, and then do we have enough of a sample so that we could do it 3,000 times for like every unique day, and then one for all the contests. And it just got super complicated very quickly. And so what we kind of found the middle ground of is, rather than, because frankly, simming it out 3,000 times can be interesting, but it's not super relevant to us day to day, because like we're not going to be able to play, practice speaking, like this contest 3,000 times. And so what we did was said, okay, how many, like roughly, I think we did like 160, right, Eric,
Yeah.
for baseball? Yeah. And we said the first 160 sims, that is for one season.
Yeah.
And then we'll do the next 160 and that'll be another season. So basically we're able to do about, what is it, like
It's
25?
like 20. I think it's
Something like
actually
that.
21.
Okay. Yeah,
That's
we're able
right.
to do a bit over 20 seasons. And that way we can say, okay, here's what your variance could look like playing this contest over a season. Here's how many seasons you go broke in this contest with different bankrolls. And that's really going to inform bankroll management too. But I think it'll make it clearer to us, just, yeah, this might be a higher ROI contest, but you need 5 times the same bankroll to have a similar chance of going broke. And so that's sort of where we left things off. And then, yeah, do we want to just kind of jump into it from here, or are there other things we should give Jordan context on?
No, I think that's good. We can just hop in there.
Yeah,
I'll
let's do it.
I'll share the screen, what I've got up here. So I guess just summarizing, what did you find on the more standard, just comparing contests with the same entry limit, different entry fee, generally the same number of entries?
Yeah, so this was pretty close to kind of what we expected. Is if you take a lineup from a higher dollar contest and you put it in a lower dollar one, you're going to increase your ROI, which basically just means that the lower dollar contests are softer.
And so, yeah, the way to read this is like, we say the base hit is $12 single entry, the daily dollar is $1 single entry. And you see this like X ROI change column. That means if you put the base hit lineup into the daily dollar, you would gain 3.83 ROI points to the, and it's percentage points, not like a percent. Like if you have a 10% ROI, it's not saying it's going to, this is a bad example, but like it's not saying it's going to 13. It's saying it would go to 13.83. Right, Eric?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That's good context. But yeah, so I think this pretty much follows kind of what we thought, and obviously it makes a lot of sense in terms of like, the lower dollar stuff. You just have less experienced players, and so yeah, that just all contributes to softer contests. I did want to point out.
Yeah,
go ahead.
For it.
I did want to point out the bottom one, which kind of like bucks the trend. So the battery, which is obviously $121 to enter, and then the skipper, which is $25. So it has like the flipped expected ROIs. So the higher dollar one, when you take that lineup and put it into the skipper, it actually lowers its ROI. And the reasoning for that is because of the rake. And so I think it's once you get over $100, the rake flips to 10% instead of 15%. And so in our comparator, when we look at the initial contest of the battery, that contest is being raked at 10%. But then when we take that lineup and put it into the skipper, all of a sudden that lineup is being raked at 15%.
Because that was one that intuitively like, oh, that's weird. But then when you actually dig into like, okay, so that really shows the impact of rake, because if it's 4 percentage points swing from $12 to $1, are probably the chin music to the daily dollar is about 2.5% swing, which is ratio wise. It's similar to this, where it's basically about 5 times the buy-in. And this is like -4. So that's pretty big.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
one other thing I wanted to highlight is that's
Mhm.
kind of interesting is the 4-seamer is 20 max, $4 contest. Quarter jukebox is 20 max, 25-cent contest. It's like very different price points. One takes $80 to max out, the other $5, and they're pretty much the same. Like the quarter jukebox is 0.65%. You would gain in ROI, but like you can call those effectively the same.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting to me. And one thing we did talk about too, Eric, is that on DraftKings there are some kind of edge cases where anything below $3, players with more than $1 million in lifetime entries cannot play regardless. Just across the board, they cannot play those. If it is under $5, they can only play a contest if it has more than, I think it was $25,000 prize pool.
Yeah, that's correct.
The 4-seamer often is above that, but maybe like half the time it's not. We don't need to do it now, but like, did you analyze both versions of it? Like we mentioned?
I did not know.
Okay.
I did I'm pretty sure it's, at least in what we have in our database, it's actually like a non-experienced contest. I want to say like 75% of the time.
Okay.
So like the majority of, I guess the sample here would be excluding experienced players, which probably contributes somewhat to why it's similar to the quarter jukebox.
Yeah.
But I mean, I also think it's like a very accessible contest, and sort of like also just like an attractive contest where you still have a low entry fee, but it's good structure, and for like a casual player or just like an average player, you're still getting those, like if you get first, like it's like a lot of money kind of thing. And so I think that all kind of contributes to it being, I guess, relatively a little bit softer than we would expect.
Yeah. And so I'm just going to add it to the list of like the final analysis.
Mhm.
To compare those.
It's also interesting. The effect here is most extreme on lower entry limit contests. Like the impact of entry fees seems to be diluted as the entry limit gets bigger a bit. It's not a perfect pattern, but
that makes sense to me because this is, I know I go back to poker a lot. It's just kind of how my brain works for comparing things. But in poker, I think some sites that cater towards recreational players would limit the number of tables you could play. And there usually was some limit to it, but it was pretty high. But even then, it's like the top players might play 20 tables at once, around there. And it's probably a different game nowadays. But when you're doing that, you are objectively playing worse at each of those tables because you can't spend as much time on it. So your leverage, call it like 20 times theoretically, but it's less than that because your impact goes down. In DFS, it basically, like, it's, if you know how to use, if you have a process that lets you mass multi-entry, incremental lineups take effectively no more time and doesn't really lower your expectation. I guess you could theoretically be going like farther down the expected value rank, but practically speaking, that it shouldn't make much of an impact. And so what I'm getting at is that in the 150 max contest, you are going to be playing against kind of, it's going to be more consolidated around those top players.
Right.
And it also is just going to, like, they're going to eat up more of that dead money. Whereas like they just can't get that leverage in the lower entry limit ones.
Yeah, I do think that the like scaling from a $5 lineup or like one single lineup to 20 lineups, like the analogy you had with multi-tabling, I do think that that's something that we should kind of touch on later, because like I'm somewhat in agreement with you in terms of like it isn't all that difficult to scale up, but I also do think there are considerations there where it's like, going from one lineup to 20 lineups, you still can kind of look through your pool and, make some calls and make sure that all of those lineups look like something you would play in single entry. But to go from like 20 to 150, I do think that there's a decent amount of like, I don't know, just like lineups you wouldn't necessarily play if you were playing a single entry or something like that. And so, I mean, I do think that that's somewhat of an important distinction.
What do you think
But
the impact of that is? Because to me, I almost feel like this data suggests the opposite. Not the opposite of your qualitative analysis, but like I would then assume that if that manual control, quality control, whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
is adding value, I would then assume that a single entry is going to be harder. Not necessarily like in absolute terms, but that would make it likely that the average lineup in there is stronger if
right.
what you're saying is true.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's more of like what I was talking about is more of like a feeling. So, I mean, it might be completely wrong. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like if I'm looking at my like 140th lineup, it's like, oh, this lineup kind of sucks. um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
No,
the data.
Yeah, I guess I get the direction you're pointing, and it's probably true. That like if you were to compare, the way you try to test that assumption is just, is the average lineup from a winning player in that contest do better than the average lineup in the other, and not by as far as like results even, it's just by like points, like are they building better lineups, but even then like you're building different kinds of lineups for different contests, and so I think it's hard to measure. But the way I read this data is that even if that does have an impact, it is dramatically outweighed by the impact that you just get the truly top players have way less leverage on the field. You're playing against a worse player on average.
And I think that makes sense, because if you're putting in 150 lineups or if you're putting in 20 lineups, you probably have some sort of process that like, you're a good player basically. Like
Right.
if you're putting 150 in, your 140th lineup like might not be fantastic, but because you're putting 150
Exactly.
in, it's sort of like selection bias.
Right.
Where,
So no, exactly. It's like you might not have built that lineup yourself, but that doesn't mean it's a minus EV lineup. Whereas there's going to be a shit ton of minus EV lineups in those single entries because people just aren't able to build good lineups.
Right.
So no, that makes sense. Jump into the next one. Results, total entries, and max entries. So this is saying holding the entries pretty constant except for a couple of these. And the what is this analyzing? How would you describe it?
So this one, I mean, this sort of leads into kind of what we were talking about next. But so for these, we were trying to hold our total entries constant, and we were varying both the limit in the contest and the entry fee.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I think some of the results are interesting, like the rally cap and the solo shot. I mean, they're obviously very different contests, and you have some sort of confounding stuff going on where it's like, the rally cap is $8 to enter, and you can enter a whole lot more lineups, which should make it sharper, and we do see that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think what this shows us is like the overwhelming sort of takeaway from stuff like this should be like, we should look at the variance of the contest.
This doesn't seem that.
I guess to
Or go
flesh out what you mean, or what I think you're getting at, you're saying that, one, this is actually going to be something that if you're listening to this, I would recommend jumping over to YouTube so you can see the numbers. But we'll try to give some examples, but it's just going to be much better to see visually. But like, I think what you're getting at is that there is an ROI change that typically it's showing the entry fee does have, like, going down an entry fee will almost always improve your ROI. And when you say to look at the variance, it's because we don't like ROI doesn't pay the bills, like profit does. And I would take a 10% ROI in $1,000 contest all day, and these are just random numbers, versus a 25% contest and $100, a 25% ROI in $100 contest, because the other one is actually like creating more profit for me. And is that sort of what you're getting at? It's like, okay, so with that analysis, we have to figure out, yes, these contests are theoretically better from a ROI standpoint, but you're going to be making less. So let's see what sort of bankroll will be needed and what kind of swings would be involved in moving up in stakes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's just a lot of like, if we're trying to hold our total entries sort of constant, like we are, obviously we're varying our entry fee, our limit is changing here too. And so we just have a bunch of stuff sort of compounding and I guess confounding, where it's like we can't definitively say like, because of this, I don't know, an increased number of entries means a softer contest or something, because the comparisons are just really difficult to make in a good way. And so like, the minimax compared to the relay throw, I think we all can agree is a little bit softer, but without seeing that, like, it's doubled the total entries. And so without sort of seeing how that impacts your variance over a season, and if you can realize that ROI, like, it's sort of like what you were saying, like, who cares if you have a 2% ROI if it's going to take you, 3 times longer to sort of realize it. So
what were you going to say before, Jordan?
Well, so what I was going to say is that I was confused. I get it now more. I was confused by Eric's point about this data being kind of confounding here, because to me, at first glance, the story was kind of clear that like the contest we expect to be intuitively softer is across the board here. And to me, that seems clear. But
meaning lower buy-in contests.
Yes. So the solo shot is softer than the rally cap. The quarter jukebox is softer than the relay throw. The mini max is slightly softer than the relay throw. Like,
right. The relay throw being a $15 per entry contest, mini max being $1, both $150 entry limit.
Exactly. Yeah. But the time horizon to realize that ROI, I kind of see now why that's important. These numbers, I guess, don't really work in the vacuum, like I was first thinking. So, and it's
I mean,
for me to observe and listen here, knowing that you guys spoke last week, because I think I'm getting to kind of look at this with a little bit of fresh eyes.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So I'll jump to the next one. I'm curious, Eric. Yeah, if you want to set up this next slide, just kind of going through the contest selection process, because that's what I kept going back to is saying, okay, like how is this going to inform decisions? Because if we're looking at it, like for the most part, I think all this analysis up until this point has been helpful in just emphasizing the impact of entry fee. But practically nobody is deciding between spending $20 to $150 to max out the relay throw versus $150 to max out the mini max. And so it's like grounding this analysis from here in practical things. And I think, like, if I were to write down principles right now for condo selection, it would be prioritizing the lowest buy-in stuff first, almost regardless of entry limit. But I think around the margins is where you'd get some questions like, okay, the relay throw is a 20 max contest. It's going to cost $80 to max it out. There's the 50-cent mini max, which is going to cost $75 to figure out. Like, I could see people like figuring out like which one should I play. Right. And so I think like that's a specific one to look into, but there's going to be a lot of decisions like that where it's, okay, do we literally max out everything below $3 before doing anything above? Do we max out 20 max and under below $3? Like, how do we analyze that? So I'm just curious where your head's at now, and if you think we have enough information. We don't need to like give the answer now, but I'm curious like what your thoughts are, and if we have enough so far to like make that some suggestions there.
Yeah, so I guess my thought with that would be, with sort of what we're coming up on, like the gains that you get by maxing a contest, whether it's like a 20 max or 150 max, in terms of sort of realizing your ROI, I think are like massive compared to something like a 2% ROI change or something like that. And so like for me, if I was to recommend something, I mean, obviously you have to be good at multi-entry and know how to use the tools and everything. But what I would recommend is as many lineups at like as low as possible of an entry fee as you can, basically. Yeah.
And to just make sure we do keep it grounded, like the actual decisions people go through.
Mm-hmm.
It's for the lowest state, like the broadly speaking, it seems like the entry limit, if all other factors are held the same, number of entrants, entry fee, the higher the entry limit, the tougher the contest is going to be on average. So yeah, it's like, it's not as though it's a decision of, do I do single entries or do I max these other ones out? You should build that foundation probably on those low dollar, still like the low entry limit ones, because those are going to be higher ROI, but it's more trying to almost persuade people of the fact that like, hey, like don't just stop there. And before you start adding some of these higher buy-in single entries, you're probably going to be better suited. Even if those have a higher ROI, you're probably going to be better suited to like do more entries in some of these other ones.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I think that what you really gain in limiting variance by playing sort of more lineups across the slate, I think that is big. And then you even like, you get some compounding going, and yeah, that would definitely be my recommendation.
Okay. Okay. So for like my notes that I have for now, for just because what we're trying to do is get as close as we can to the like conclusion. Mm-hmm. And then once you feel like you're there, well, basically after this call, you'll go like take the next steps to plug in the gaps. And then you and Jordan will do an office hours to share all that, interview, deeper questions, all that kind of thing. And so I think the things that I have notes on that would be good to add would be the four-seamer, non-experienced versus experienced,
Mhm.
the 50-cent minimax versus the four-seamer, and just seeing if there's anything else that would be good to do that. And maybe you've done some of that analysis or something similar when we look at the variance. But I feel like that's for variance analysis, not necessarily like just ROI analysis and variance. Just making some notes. Okay, so for the variance stuff, you've got, this is basically like what you did is just for a different contest pair. Chin Music, $5 single entry, quarter jukebox, 25 cent, 20 max. Both cost $5 to max out. And so, yeah, what did you find here?
Yeah, so I guess, and again, this is going to be significantly better if you're watching on YouTube or something, because there's two graphs. But yeah, so for this, pretty similar expected ROIs across both of the contests, but just like visually from the graphs, you sort of
the graphs are showing it's okay. So it's profit on the left, day on the x-axis, and
so each line is like a season, essentially.
Exactly. So there's 20 different lines. Each line is showing 20 seasons. This has been simulated by saying a season is 160 randomly selected sims from our, like, iterating out the entire contest 160 different times for one season, then doing it again for the next, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And so, I mean, just visually, you can see the difference in the variance in playing one lineup in a contest.
I mean, on the left, it's just like all over.
Extremely
like, you have some huge jumps because winning the Chin Music is a much bigger payout as far as like ROI goes than winning the quarter jukebox. But like, it seems like if you don't win it, there's a good chance you're not going to be profitable for the season.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I found with the Chin Music is, so even, this person, they have an expected ROI in our stuff at about 30%. And they still had essentially 50% of their seasons where they lost money. And then within that, their bankroll dropped from $200 to zero 6 times in these sims. Compared that to the quarter jukebox, I'm going to change this because I did this backwards, where I have the expected ROI like lower here. So I'm going to change that a little bit just to like kind of match it up with the chart that's like above it, because I feel like that's kind of inconsistent. But
wait,
why is it
ROI lower in the quarter jukebox?
Right.
Pardon me?
The expected ROI should be lower in the quarter jukebox, right?
No, it's confusing because actually, wait.
The table at the top makes it seem like it would be higher.
Yeah.
The table at the top says that going from the Chin Music to the quarter jukebox gives you 1.87% more ROI.
Yeah, it should be slightly higher. I mean,
but like, why is it not? Is it just a typo? Or
well, so this is two different players. Does that make sense? So like, this is two actual players that took part in these in these contests.
Okay, they're showing different things.
Yeah.
Because what we did is the ROI change is measured by taking a lineup from the Chin Music, pretending that was entered in the quarter jukebox, and just seeing how the ROI changes. Whereas with this, it's taking a player from the Chin Music, seeing what their variance looks like over 20 seasons, and taking a player from the quarter jukebox with a similar ROI,
right,
and seeing how they do over 20 seasons. So they're like just measuring different things.
Right. Yeah, and
Okay.
I didn't want to put. I mean, I could have done like the chin music lineup, basically right next to it. But I was a little nervous to like just with a single entry versus a 20. Like how do you kind of reconcile that together in terms of like the intention of the lineup, and then you're picking 20 lineups somehow, even though you're only putting the one from the chin. Like
Right.
it just gets a little bit
Yeah.
messy. But yeah, so for the quarter jukebox, I mean, you can see that it's just a lot less variance
Yeah,
at the end
there's
of a season.
there's still jumps from winning it, but the spikes are nowhere near as big.
Yeah,
And the lines are just all grouped much more steadily. And the two stats we haven't actually mentioned that I think you and I talked a lot about was just the number of losing seasons and the number of times going bust. And so this is kind of wild, is that in like a 30% ROI is high. I mean, at these contests, like maybe that is sustainable, but like that seems high on the high
it's
end.
really good. Yeah, yep.
Yeah. And with that ROI, and you're saying the expected ROI is if you just did this like for overall 3,000 simulations, right?
Correct. Yeah,
Right.
that's like long-term expected ROI.
Right. And so it's still like there are 9 losing seasons if you're only measuring. The better way of phrasing it is probably like there are 9 losing seasons in this contest. Like you might have other things to balance it out, but if you're looking at how you performed over this in this specific contest, almost half the time you lose in the season, and you actually go broke 6 times, so like a little less than a third, and that's with a $200 bankroll. So that's making it so that it's 40 times the cost to max it out. And so yeah, that's I guess 2.5% of your bankroll in this one contest.
Yep.
And then for the quarter jukebox, number of losing seasons 5, so that's basically cut in half. You only go broke once, and the ROI is very similar. And that, so I mean, I guess theoretically, like number of losing seasons and busts probably won't change because those are like pretty big. They're less precise numbers, but like if someone had a 29.9% ROI, or like what I think this is what you're getting at before, is that the best comparison would be to say, okay, you gain 1.87% from going from the chin music to the quarter jukebox. Let's take the chin music expected ROI, add 1.87% to it, and find a player with the ROI closest to that. Like you're saying, that's going to be the most accurate.
Yeah, I think that'll just illustrate, like, I guess it'll kind of keep the continuity well, because we're saying, okay, the quarter jukebox is like pretty close to 2% softer. So I just should have done the expected ROI basically going the other way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, so like this is kind of, I guess, where I feel like I could do a little bit better in terms of like, I know that we have these like number of losing seasons and number of busts, but I feel like we want something like solid. And so, whether that's like a standard deviation or something like that, it just like, I mean, obviously you can visually like see the difference in variance, like through these graphs, but I feel like, I don't know, I almost want just like some number or something where it's like, okay, like this, the quarter jukebox is 20 entries instead of 1. Like, how can we, instead of like showing it through the graph and showing the variance change, how can we sort of put that more like succinctly?
How easily can you change the bankroll?
Very easily.
Could you just
And
solve
so-
for, or maybe it's more of guess and check rather than like truly solving for it, but like, what if we
Yeah,
just
so-
found out the bankroll where the chance of bust is 0?
So I went the opposite way, but if you go to the next slide, this was one of my sort of thoughts is in one of them, I adjusted the bankroll to $100. And so in this one, then we're losing 5 of the seasons, we're going bust 3. So this would be playing like 5% of your bankroll in this. And so, yeah, so basically I just was trying to answer where the variance equals the variance in the other contest. And then the one other thing I did was like, because obviously you can adjust the percentage of your bankroll that you're playing. But then also it was like, what if you're playing less days? And how does that sort of affect the variance? And so for that, we actually get to the 9 losing seasons. And so basically what that is saying is like 160 days of a single entry is like somewhat comparable to 100 days of 20 max.
I don't know if I would go that far.
Okay.
Well, I wouldn't go that far because I think there's a significant difference between having a losing season and going broke. Like,
I agree.
and yes, so they might have the same number of losing seasons. They might about half the time have a losing season,
Right.
but in the chin music, they're 6 times as likely to lose literally everything. And that's, I think, the risk we should optimize around. And so it might be that's why I do feel like finding the number where is bankroll for number of busts to be 1 and then bankroll for number of busts to be 0, because there's a chance that like 0 is just not practical. But saying what is the lowest bankroll that allows it to be 1 and the high, and then like at what point does that cross over to 0? Yeah.
Right. And so what you're basically saying is try and match this like chin music variance to the variance of the quarter jukebox.
No. Oh, maybe, but that's not
Yeah, I guess
in the way that like I'm thinking.
Right.
What I'm saying is like independent of everything else. You talked about like getting something concrete, like a number. I think that number would be for the chin music. Tell us at what point, what is the smallest bankroll you can have to have only go bust once, where if you go below that, like you're if you go below that, like you then are going to, now my head's all broken.
No, I get what you're saying.
Okay.
Like, how big does that $200 bankroll number need to be to give you enough runway over 20 seasons so you have 0 busts?
Yeah. And I guess
it makes sense to me too, Andy. I phrase it weird, but
is this something that can be done, like you can solve for it, or is it really just like, because
no,
it is somewhat arbitrary that I'm picking going bust once. What about like 2 times? Like, what does that look like? So if it's something where it's easy, just look at different numbers of going bust, that would be great. But if it changes the scope of what you have to do, that's a different question.
No, it's so I guess just in this the left, the chin music sort of graph there, the biggest downswing was minus $280. And so if you had a $300 bankroll, you would have gone bust 0 times.
Oh, wow. That's not what I expected.
Yeah.
So these 6 busts, they were so close.
Yeah, it was
almost like they barely.
Well, because the big thing is that what I think people don't have a good intuitive understanding of is the importance of sequence of returns, where any of these ones that won early on had zero chance of going bust. But like some of these ones that went broke, they could have still hit that win like the next lineup, but they had no more money, so they couldn't play. So one of the important things that I was talking with Eric about was it needs to stop once they hit zero. Like it needs to be a true bankroll. Because like I think this sort of shows, if one line just kept going, the ROI would be that 29.9. It's just like, this is just different ways of having it. And so that's more the thing, which is still surprising, but like it's because of the sequence of returns.
I think too, like, in over this season for this player, like they're playing $800 total. And so, to have a $300 downswing, it doesn't seem like a lot, but like that's a lot of losing. So,
well, and also an increase of a bankroll to $280 to reduce bust to zero is, in my head, when you first said that seemed small, but that's actually like a 40% increase from their starting point, which is a lot.
Yeah. And so that, instead of this is 2.5%, they would be playing like 1.7% of their bankroll every day. Which again, it doesn't, like 2.5 to 1.7 doesn't seem like all that much, but I think that's pretty significant.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out so this next one is where, you looked at different bankroll size. And so, I guess to be clear, what I would do is, I don't think you need to do it for like every single number of busts, but I would do it 0, 1, 2, 3. And because I think it will be interesting to see at what point is there just diminishing returns. I guess going the other direction is where the diminishing returns would get, where it's like maybe going from 2 to 1 requires a much bigger bankroll. And that's something that I think when it comes to giving these suggestions to people is going to be really important, because a lot of it does come down to risk. And so we can say, like, look, if you want, we'll never say 0 chance of bust because there's so many assumptions baked into it, but we can show like you'll need twice as big of a bankroll as if you're okay with going bust some percent of the time. And what my assumptions would be is that for more casual players, for smaller bankroll amounts, people are going to be more comfortable with the chance of going bust because it's less likely to have an impact on their lives. Whereas when you become a pro, or just is contributing meaningfully to your life, that's where it's probably going to make sense to change that risk tolerance when the numbers get like real to you. But the question I have is, it's still doing this in a very, it's making binary comparisons. Are there ways where you could look at, say, okay, where you could just actually measure the variance of different portfolios of lineups, where you could say someone is investing $100. Here are 2 different ways they could get there. What is the chance of them going bust? Like not in this one contest, but just like in general, right? Because like that's overall much more representative of a season, is playing multiple contests.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's doable. It's just a little tricky, and like, we would be making some choices in like, what is this player like? They're 20% here. Then we have to find a 20% player in another contest, or like,
well, I mean,
you could get into like following a player through different
that's what
contests.
Like, because you could relatively easily just say, for each of these portfolios, let me find people who played all these contests and just choose that person.
Yep. I could do that.
Do we want to look for somebody with maybe a little bit of a lower ROI for any of this analysis? I feel like 30% is absolute, like elite.
I was going to bring that up too, actually, just in terms of like, yeah, I mean, I guess that's another variable that we like don't really, or that we hold constant that isn't constant is like, obviously if your ROI is lower, the bankroll you need to sustain, or yeah, the bankroll you need basically to not go broke is going to need to be more.
Right. Which I think is true of most people out there.
Yeah.
That they don't have a 50% expected ROI.
True.
Like, even if we just, I mean, that's probably not even if you just siloed all winning players, that's probably still a pretty top outcome.
Yeah, I could do that. Andy, how do you feel about that? I mean, so I like that because I think
biggest factor
if
to
we start
me,
banding things,
the biggest factor to me is going to be how much time this stuff takes you to do. Because like if it's a matter of updating the queries to just like do more shit, then yes, get more granular. If you have to like repeat this process manually for each different bucket we look at, then yeah, we're gonna have fewer buckets. But if it's on the more automated side, I would just do 5% increments from -10, -5, 0, 5, and then up to 30 and above. Like 30 and up is the highest bucket, -10, smallest bucket. And then just use your best guess of how to group them within that, and don't like stress too much there.
Okay. And yeah, so the latter, that's how I have it set up right now, where it splits into the buckets of ROI. But like, yeah, I guess just readability wise, I'm like, I don't know, if we're going to be throwing 5 different graphs at people at varying ROIs, like that might be a little bit more confusing versus just like, oh, here's a winning player. So yeah.
I mean, what I would say is, Jordan, if you want to, yeah, we've got, it's like a somewhat hard stop in a few minutes. If you want to look at, what I would say, yeah, Jordan, it create a handful of portfolios of contests saying, okay, someone's putting $20 in. Someone's and adjust the numbers based on contests that like actually fit it. Like there's that $27 single entry. So like $27 is probably a good one. And then figure out what are 2 other ways someone could get that much money down. And then do it for 100, 250, and probably even 1,000. Just, I would say at least those. And then, yeah, so 25-ish, 100, 250, 1,000, potentially a 500 or 600, something like that. And then 3 buckets for each. And maybe it's some of the highest. Well, no, you should be able to find 3.
Okay. Do you think like a contest should be mutually exclusive to a bucket? So like if I'm saying
no, because like the biggest thing is just treat this as though, try to get in the person's, like it should be contest someone would actually play.
Okay.
So if think of like their style, like they might, I prefer single entries, which is a lot of people do. So like I would always have one bucket that favors single entries. But I think it's rare to find a person who like doesn't play any single entries.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, like the bucket should be logically consistent, but that would mean that I would still probably include those single entries in the other buckets, but there should be one bucket that's all it is. And then one is like, first I'm going to max out the mini max, and then I'll see what else I can fit in to stay within my thresholds. And that's usually going to be like single entries. And then, yeah, and maybe just 2 buckets is okay. But I would say up to 3.
Okay.
Um,
And then we're going to try to find a real player that actually fit those portfolios.
we're going to try to find a player that had entries in those contests. It doesn't mean they exclusively had entries in those contests.
Gotcha.
Like they could have played a bunch of other ones, but they had them in all of those.
Okay. Cool.
Because we don't necessarily care about their portfolio decisions. We just care that we have the most consistent data set to analyze to figure this out. Because we're really going to be measuring like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be playing that contest, but them playing that other contest has no bearing on another contest. Just the fact that they did play it. That makes sense?
Yep.
And okay, so to summarize, going to do ROI analysis and variance analysis for the 4-seamer non-experienced versus experienced, the 50-cent mini-max versus a 4-seamer. And for the variance analysis, you're going to use the ROI change approximately to pick who to analyze in the softer contest. You're going to look at different ROIs, -10, -5, 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30 and up. For the -10, though, don't do -10 and under. Like keep it to around that. And then identify the bankroll needed to hit different number of busts. And you'll be looking at the portfolio of contests that get to different total buy-ins.
Sounds good.
Cool. And yeah, I mean, I think we're still going to figure out the way to put it all together. So what I would say, Eric, is don't obsess over presentation.
Okay.
Get the data together, and then we can do like, it doesn't need to be recorded because it'll just be more housekeeping stuff, but like we can get together, review it, and just say, okay, like how should we polish this up to make it presentable? And I think, yeah, what I'll do is this will be hosted live on office hours, but we will also post that recording on this podcast feed as well, so that people at least listening don't have to like jump to another place to get the conclusion. But I'm really excited about this because we're getting closer to the ultimate question, like the practical question. And I think we started out pretty theoretical, realized I hadn't kept dialing in, and we're like, okay, wait, but like people aren't actually making that decision. No one's going to be deciding between the daily dollar and whatever that $121 single entry is. And so I think this is that last step to get it as practical as we can. There's a lot of other things we could look into down the road, but I think we'll call it after this. But I think just to plant the seed in everyone, I think looking at actually building lineups and seeing how those would have done in a contest lets us then analyze things like stack sizes, seeing both what the expected ROI is as well as the variance, seeing how does that change based on the size of the slate, and that sort of thing. It could help us give better rules of thumb to people. And again, our big thing is not relying just on rules of thumb, but it's understanding the data. But at the end of the day, rules of thumb exist for a reason. And so we want to give content that lays out those best practices, is probably a better way of phrasing it than rules of thumb, and build our tools to give people that nuance that they're not able to get manually. And so some of that stack analysis and other kind of things would be really helpful as we look at the actual like builder code and everything else to see how can we improve it to just create lineups that are more that fit different profiles better. But all right, got to run. Anything else before we sign off? Cool. All right. Well, really appreciate it, Eric. Appreciate the feedback as well, Jordan. But yeah, we'll sync up and get this wrapped up. Thanks, guys.
Cool. See ya.
Thanks.